Hi, I'm Adam Howatson, CEO at LogiSense, and I'm here today with
Daniel Kube, CEO of ServicePath. We're a CPQ platform.
Excellent. LogiSense provides usage-based billing to customers around the world, and in partnership with ServicePath, we're here today to talk about best-of-breed solutions for your quote-to-cash cycle, for monetizing and taking your products to market, and preparing for this agentic and AI-based future with all of the complexities that come along with monetizing those types of go-to-markets. Tell me a little bit about ServicePath. Tell me a little bit about CPQ and what kind of changes you're seeing in the industry today.
ServicePath has been in the traditional quote-to-cash or configure price quote platform space for about 12 years. We started off in the managed services space, and the only reason I mention that is it's really important to the genesis of where we are today. So when Mike and Ian, the two founders, founded the company, they were dealing with managed service providers who were already selling as a service, consumption-based models literally 12 years ago. And it was called hosting back then, if you remember. And they're also doing assembly of all sorts of different products together to create a solution. So combining hardware, software, and services, things that are really commonplace today. But back then, when they were doing it, it was more of a P times Q world when you're selling quote-to-cash solutions. So the reason why that's really relevant today is now everyone has those same attributes in the Fortune 500 as those MSPs did literally 12 years ago. And so, when we first met LogiSense, we're going, wow, these guys get it. They understand consumption models, they understand complex solutions, and they also understand best of breed. So, that's what I'm really excited to be here and discuss it even further and learn a bit more.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to diving into those topics as well. Start with one, which is we're seeing a shift in economics lately. And for those of us who've been working in the industry for a long time, we remember when there was a perpetual license and time and materials services and maintenance annuities that would follow you through time at 20 to 25%. And we've seen a big shift in the industry and in the way that people sell and go to market and how sales teams can be equipped to be flexible, to contend with the new products that organizations are taking to market. And we've gone through the subscription era. I don't know about you, but I have 10 or 15 different subscriptions at home, many of which I don't use anymore. I think about that in my professional life and think I should shut those down and save that money if I'm not using them, because this opaque, flat subscription, pay for it and use it or don't, doesn't always deliver a ton of value. And now we're sitting in a market where we're starting to see outcome-based pricing. We're starting to see usage-based monetization of services to pay for what you get value from. And we're starting to see the emergence of solutions like agentic AI-based interfaces and workflows within organizations. How do you feel that shift in our go-to-market model 2 or 3 times over the past 10 or 15 years has impacted organizations? And what should they be looking for in competent go-to-market CPQ, billing, and monetization partners?
It's actually quite tricky. So outcome-based success sort of payment programs are really interesting and really high value to the people who are using them. However, when you're selling them, they're also very dangerous, right? Because the challenge is if you're selling a complex solution and it becomes outcome-based, you have to really understand your cost constructs under that solution. Generally speaking, someone's just not selling one widget in these types of solutions. It's a myriad of different products that are stacked together. And as mentioned earlier, they can be products, they can be services, they can be other consumption models like AWS or Azure. So one of the reasons why ServicePath was also created, when we think of the world of configure price quote, we have another C, and it's actually in front of the configure, and it's cost. Right? So before you can determine if an outcome-based service is actually valuable to you as the seller, you have to understand, are we actually going to make money if we sell this way? And unless you aggregate your cost structures and understand, okay, if we sell this many or this many outcomes, and understand what that implication will be to your bottom line and how many things you may have to pre-buy or buy after the fact for that customer, it's really dangerous territory. And that's one of the other reasons why we think LogiSense is awesome, because you guys understand those constructs and you understand you have to pull all this billing information specific to those inputs to actually send out an invoice, right? So the whole goal is to make it easy for someone to sell that way, but also protect them so they have these, buffers so they are actually making good fiscal decisions when they're selling an outcome-based solution or service. So one of the things that we do in ServicePath, which is kind of unique, and Gartner actually spells this out in their report, is we're the only vendor that actually gives a deal dashboard specific to that quote that you sold. Are you underwater? Are you making money? When is the payback? Because some of these deals, you might need 50 different outcomes to actually be profitable over a 5 or 10 year contract, right? So you have to understand when you're selling that, what is the implication of selling this and negotiating and signing this, but also do it with safety and governance.
What are some of the challenges that organizations face today with traditional CPQ and billing solutions that may prevent them or lock them into some rigidity when they're contemplating how they're going to start to monetize AI-based solutions or digital or usage-based solutions in their go-to-market?
Configure price quote has been around for probably 20 years and in some variant before that. We've always prided ourselves on being codeless, and it was more from a selfish construct because we didn't have the huge services team to go do these massive deployments. And one of the reasons why that has paid significant benefits is you need to empower the organization, the ability for the business unit to make the changes, modify, and build new solutions. The other vector that's going on currently is the rate of change is only increasing, right? So a product team has to say, oh, we now need a AI version 1, version 2, version 3 for this new solution set. We got to price that, we got to build models. In the old model, a lot of our competitors, you have to go back to the IT team to actually code and figure out that integration into the product catalog or the different tools to actually pull that pricing information in. We've always been this whole vision of making it codeless so that BU or the analysts on the team can actually do that to give your team the velocity. The reason why we actually are still really happy that our competitors don't do it our way is because most of our competitors fall into a death spiral where actually the pricing catalog or the pricing gets out of date, and then people start reverting to other tools, for example, like spreadsheets, because they're saying, I need current and actual information that's relevant. I can't wait for the IT team to take a month or 2 months to change this because they're working on an ERP implementation, for example. And these are sort of, I would say, sort of symptoms of much mid-sized and larger organizations. But it's one of the reasons why we still are constantly reinforcing, trying to make it as easy and simple for the BU to actually manage and maintain the solution, and also give the pricing and sales teams the agility to get new solutions out quickly so they don't fall into that death spiral like our competitors.
Increasingly, we're seeing AI having an impact both on the way that we are productive within our businesses, whether that's large language models that are capable of quickly answering questions about the use of specific platforms, training or educating employees, or being a really robust resource that you can consult with that is trained within a specific area of expertise. Increasingly, we're starting to see AI be applied in our external solutions, right? And delivering clear value to customers, I think, is a key element of that. And not every business necessarily gets that right. They bolt on AI and put an AI label on there, hoping they'll get market traction, but don't clearly articulate how they're going to use AI to benefit their customers. Now, I understand that ServicePath and LogiSense both have AI initiatives around agentic interfaces and different capabilities to help customers understand the vast volumes of data that flow through our systems. But ServicePath in particular has a native AI architecture. Could you tell us a little bit about how that's equipped you to deal with today's market and how that benefits your customers?
Yeah, so we've sort of been taking a more thoughtful approach on how we're actually embracing AI, and I think I shared with you, if you can't be good, be lucky. So our native architecture has always been built on a document database. The reason for that is it's allowed us to do massive computations for really huge pricing and quotes, like thousands of line items, things like that, just crazy stuff. And our vendor who supports us actually has now become native AI. So they actually support embeddings in all the actual document assets within the document database, which is the foundational layer within our product. That allows us now to do true vector search across business rules, against quotes, about the way who's engaged, which markets they're in. So we're now working on creating really high value solutions that will add a ton of value versus just bolting on. And the nice thing about it is we can do so many different things. Now we're just trying to focus on what are the ones that are going to have the highest, most relevant impact to our users, right? So for example, for a salesperson to be able to interrogate a quote in a discussion-friendly way to say, hey, how can I maximize this? Or how could I improve the margin if I do this complex solution? Things like that. So, more coming out, but yeah, we're really excited about that, the fact that it's embedded in our platform and using it universally. The other thing that we're doing just organizationally, we're really transforming the way work gets done in the business. Everyone's taking an AI first initiative sort of approach, very similar to, what Toby's memo that came out from Shopify. Everyone thinks like, how could AI solve this first before we actually look at any problem and challenge now in the organization? And the adoption's been amazing. Everyone's super enthusiastic. It's giving us a bunch of time back, which is great, and allowing us to think a bit more, because, before we had no gap. Now we're getting some air gap to actually think about these things. And that's actually another interesting development that we're finding. A lot of our customers now are really worried about AI and where the data is going and who's having it and who has access to it. And we're also seeing those trends emerge with some of the big stack vendors who we compete with. So as you know, Salesforce is a CRM that most of our customers use, but they're also a huge stack that sells billing and sells everything pretty much. Our customers are now coming to us concerned saying, hey, they're locking down the data in this stack. We love Salesforce for its CRM. We think we're a much better CPQ, and we think LogiSense is a much better billing platform than theirs. So, hence this conversation, relationship, and partnership.
Regardless of whether you're a small, medium, or large company, when you're contemplating your go-to-market tooling and technology, you're thinking about your quote-to-cash, your CPQ technologies, how then you're going to monetize and bill. What are some of the key considerations that business leaders should be making when contemplating I'll call it a monolithic stack, which might have things like lockdown, might have things like AI data and retraining policies that you can't really get around, versus contemplating a best-of-breed solution and solutions that are designed specifically for what your needs may be within a broader organization?
Well, if you look at some of the trends right now, some of the big vendors are trying to lock down their data, and that makes you more of a data jail if you're beholden or you can't easily get those assets out anymore. And the fact is, when you might have the best CRM, but really substandard billing and substandard CPQ layers, you're really slowing down your organization. And when you think about in our world, and I'm sure it's also in the billing world, in the CPQ world, the first salesperson who gets you a quote, generally speaking, is still the person who wins the business in most cases, like well documented. And that's one of the reasons why CPQ is still, super high value and really, embraced by enterprises, because CEOs realize if they get the quote out faster and better with strong governance now, because you don't want to do bad deals, but if you can get it out faster than anybody else, your chances of winning that are way higher. So therefore, your revenue will be driven. As the ocean lifts, everyone's getting a bit faster, but how can you incrementally be faster? And it comes down to the agility of the system, so your people to use them and draft them and move them. And from the AI stack perspective, I think, it's important to have vendors that believe that, we should be able to embrace via integration all sorts of other vendors, as opposed to saying we're a monolith like ServiceNow, we're a monolith like Salesforce, or a monolith like SAP.
How would you suggest leaders in the executive office, in finance, in product and pricing, in sales, contemplate a journey to refresh, to modernize, and to extend the capability of their CPQ, billing, and quote-to-cash systems? If I'm sitting here listening to you, Daniel, what you're saying makes an awful lot of sense, but I'm not exactly sure how I start to get started. What types of considerations should I make as I contemplate the modernization of my organization's go-to-market motion?
When I boil it, if I'm a mid-size or large entity or enterprise, I think there are some analysts out there that do some amazing stuff, like Gartner, MGI, Forrester. And the reason why I believe the analysts are more important than ever is because they are actually spending the time getting to know the vendors and actually talking to customers, not interpreting it through like social review sites that are kind of can be kludgy. But by the same token, they're doing it on a regular basis, and they're looking for where the market is going, and they're also validating it against when they actually see a demo of the product. The easy way now for most executives to do it is basically use an LLM and say, give me the top 5 vendors in this area, and and I'm off to the races for my short list. The challenge is LLMs, the way they build their information, is actually not pulling some of the vendors like you and I out of it, because we don't have the marketing dollars, for example, of an Oracle or an SAP. However, we actually have great customer reviews, and we have great analyst coverage. So I think from a CEO perspective, the one thing I absolutely recommend is go for the guys who really understand your space. Look for verticalized expertise and validation, because the worlds we live in are massive, right? So we do not do a lot in the discrete manufacturing world. We have some customers for sure. And why do they use us? Because they have a lot of complexity. They have a lot of requirements for governance. but we really focus on the tech-enabled world. And for those same very valid reasons, constant rate of change of the vendors and inputs. But if someone comes to us and says, hey, we're a manufacturing plant and we build fire trucks, we'll probably say, hey, we're probably not the solution for you. You should maybe consider these as, unless you have these really weird requirements. And that's one of the beauties of an analyst as well, because they have already understood, okay, where these guys strong, they've spoken to their vertical customers in those areas. But not everyone has access to those things. And then I guess the second stage I would go is go look for the review sites. Social review sites are great, but I would also argue, you just need to look at them with a grain of salt, right? I think Gartner Pure Insights is probably one of the best. We actually don't have a lot of reviews. We're on G2 a lot. And just when you're looking at these review sites, see if it was an incented review or incentivized review, because that kind of tells you the behavior a bit. And AI does allow you to build some really cool deep research products. But just to give some context, when AI first came out, we weren't coming up as one of the vendors in Gartner's reviews for the past 3 years. And we've been in the what's called the visionary quadrant for the past 3 years, 3.5 years. But it was just weird. The LLMs weren't finding us at all. So if someone's actually trying to build a short list using an LLM, beware, you're not going to be getting the best list potentially. We've done a lot to mitigate that. So now we show up, but by the same token, yeah. LLMs can be dangerous because they could give you a bad short list, for example.
I know at LogiSense, when we talk to a customer, we're looking for their interest in areas where we really differentiate. We look for whether or not they're trying to price, monetize, and bill for digital and connected services, hybrid physical and digital products. We look for customers who may require a certain degree of sophistication in the product catalog, as an example, to give them the flexibility necessary to combine multiple digital services and products to create a single offering called a product to the customer. And we thrive in those environments where there's a lot of data and a lot of usage data to be dealt with, where there is a required sophistication around how products are priced and billed, where there may be contract terms that need to be automatically enforced over time in enterprise scenarios, ramp-up periods, termination fees, other items. And those are areas where LogiSense really excels at helping to monetize the vision of our customers and how their products are brought to market. Tell me a little bit about how servicePath differentiates and really delights their customers when you start to have those discussions.
And if you look at our customers, tech-enabled businesses, quotes are now no longer sort of a finite sort of thing. Quotes are now sort of infinite contracts that continue to persist. So if you think about the way you buy Salesforce, like, yes, you've signed a 5-year contract, but you're going to need a CRM for 20 years, right? So it just keeps rolling over. And that will change and ebb and flow depending on how big your business gets and also the features that you want to have. So quotes are no longer at one time finite and die. So in ServicePath, we have this concept of when you sell something, it's a service contract. And a service contract basically morphs and changes with that customer. Some of the contracts with our MSPs are 25 years long, right? So that stack, some of the components in that stack will retire within 5 years of that 25-year contract. So how do you begin to manage that complexity? How do you swap things out? How do you make addendums and changes to that and understand the provisioning of how that should be set up? Because not only do we have the pricing information, we have all the underlying sort of provisioning information based on how many licenses support that server, how much cooling, for example, in a certain data center may you need, right? And if you boost a whole bunch of different CPUs in that room, you're going to need different cooling. So that service contract would ebb and flow and have the intelligence to say, well, if we're changing Y, X will also change. Or if something's being removed, you need to replace it because you need some sort of substitute or a support contract to license the software support for that specific vendor. So those are really sort of interesting use cases. So we have large customers like Park Place who use things like that, which are really, really cool, and they have a huge install base all over the world. And also organizations that have like a lot of complexity in a quote. So to your point where you actually sell one price per unit, that per unit will have a whole bunch of layered embedded costs that that organization needs to understand the implications of that. So for example, if you sell like widget A at so many dollars per megabyte per month, to get that price point, there might be 50 inputs. Some of those inputs you might have to prepay on a 5-year contract. So understanding, hey, I have to buy all this stuff up front. Am I going to actually get enough compensation on the back end of this to cover my costs? And organizations that understand getting that done almost dynamically out of your CPQ is really, really high value. Because the alternative is you have to go back to a deal desk And the deal desk then has to go to finance saying, hey, we need to analyze this quote. Does it make sense for us to do this massive prepay for this cost and this contract value? Especially it becomes even more complex when you start doing outcome-based pricing or quoting, right? So just saying, there has to be a floor, or is there no floor? Are we okay just saying, it's only based on one outcome? Say you get no outcomes. Like most organizations are going to say, are we okay with one outcome, even though it's $1 billion outcome? But say they don't do that over the 5 years, we lose everything. Like the ability to model and understand that is really useful for an organization, and that's where we shine when organizations have that level of complexity.
What do you think the future holds in this space? So we're at a time where we're seeing market disruption, unlike any time in our lifetimes, certainly in mine. We're seeing the emergence of new technologies and rapid proliferation of those technologies, and it's always been like that in high tech, but AI is something different. I think we can all agree this is a different one, right? It's practical, we can interact with it, it's real, it absolutely saves time, certainly on general and administrative type tasks today. With specifically trained models, they can start to influence and help with code drafting. Still, many of those models requiring thorough human review and input today. But the space is changing very quickly. Where do you see the future headed in these competitive, dynamic, uncertain, whatever descriptor we want to use, markets? And what should business leaders be paying attention to in this space over the coming years? What's become more or less important in your thought?
Anytime any new technology comes out, at the very beginning, there's this huge land grab. And the vendors who get the land grab are going to have a really preferential bias to market adoption. Because even though there's all these great models now coming out on the periphery, like ChatGPT, Gemini, all these leaders already have all these users. So it's going to be hard for these new guys to enter the market. But I think from a customer perspective, there are some fundamental truths still that are really important, right? You need, as an enterprise, to have strong governance. There's still a bunch of gray or smoke around AI governance, especially when it comes to calculations and the ability to say, hey, dissect that transaction, how did you get to that number? So that level of trust, I believe, is still not there. I think from a buyer perspective, you need to surround yourself with vendors who you trust and also you believe architecturally are making the right decisions to give them a bright future to be able to go into that new world. And I think, what else from that perspective? I think that trusting your vendors, understanding that they have a plan and a path, and also understanding that integration's still going to be king. Like if you talk about MCP, you talk about iPaaS, you talk about agentic integration, like these are all great things, but that's still, the premise there is there's going to be the requirement for integration. So any vendor you work with needs a really strong integration story. And even if AI does self-integrate in the future, the ability for that constantly to change and morph to whatever the new model may be will be super important. So you want to have organizations that have a legacy and a proven ability to constantly embrace that change.
Dan, this was an incredible chat. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge around CPQ, around quote to cash, and around how our customers can best adapt to the ever-changing requirements of market, and particularly in 2025, as we see macroeconomic factors, we see technological factors like the emergence of AI, these agentic prototypes, the MCP standards and interactions that are quickly emerging. We're sort of pouring the foundations of what the future will look like. And I found it incredibly insightful to be able to chat with you today about your perspective and how professionals can best help deal with these ever-shifting market demands. So thank you for your time.